Move to the back where you belong. This seat is for real first-class passengers.
Bradford Kane's voice cut through the hushed atmosphere of Platinum Airways' first-class cabin like a blade through silk. He didn't whisper. He didn't try to be discreet. He wanted everyone to hear him put the black man in the navy hoodie back in his place. His silver hair gleamed under the cabin lights, his bespoke Savile Row suit immaculate, his Patek Philippe watch catching the light as he gestured dismissively toward the rear of the aircraft. The man in seat 2A didn't flinch. Dante Rivers, 44 years old, sat calmly with a copy of the Wall Street Journal folded in his lap and a glass of sparkling water in his hand. His designer clothes had been replaced today by a casual navy cashmere hoodie and dark jeans, clean white sneakers completing the understated look. To everyone watching, he appeared to be exactly what Bradford Kane assumed he was, someone who didn't belong in first class. What none of them knew was that in exactly 22 minutes, Bradford's arrogance would cost his family's investment firm $350 million. Before we see how one racist comment destroyed a century-old empire, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. If you've ever been told you don't belong somewhere because of how you look, hit that subscribe button. This story is for you. And if this opening stopped you cold, give this video a like. Stories like this need to be heard, and your support helps us tell them. Now let's rewind to how this moment started. Dante Rivers had boarded Platinum Airways Flight 447 from JFK to London Heathrow at exactly 6:15 p.m. on a gray November evening. He walked through the jet bridge with no entourage, no assistant, no security detail. Just a man in comfortable clothes carrying a leather briefcase that contained documents worth more than most people would see in a lifetime. As CEO and founder of Apex Financial Holdings, Dante was worth $2.8 billion. His private equity firm specialized in rescuing failing companies, and right now Platinum Airways was bleeding money faster than a severed artery. The airline was 48 hours away from declaring bankruptcy, and Dante held their lifeline, a $350 million emergency funding package that would keep them in the sky. The irony wasn't lost on him. 25 years ago, a young Dante Rivers had walked into Kane Family Bank seeking a business loan to start his company. The loan officer, Bradford's father, had looked him up and down and declared that people like Dante were too high risk for serious investment. That rejection had lit a fire in Dante that burned for over 2 decades, driving him to build an empire that now dwarfed the Kane family fortune. Today, he held controlling interest in the very airline Bradford Kane was flying to London, where Bradford hoped to negotiate a merger that would save his family's failing investment bank. The world had a sense of humor, and Dante was about to appreciate the punchline. He settled into seat 2A, the most coveted spot in first class, and opened his newspaper. The headline made him smile: Apex Financial Posts Record Q3 Profits. Below the fold, a smaller story caught his attention. Kane Holdings shares continue decline amid merger talks. The flight attendant approached with a warm smile. Carmen Rodriguez was 28. A single mother working 3 jobs to put herself through nursing school. Her uniform was pressed to perfection, her smile genuine despite the exhaustion that showed around her eyes. "Good evening, Mr. Rivers," she said, having recognized his name from the passenger manifest. "Can I get you anything before takeoff? Just some sparkling water, Carmen?" "Thank you." Dante's voice was deep and steady, the kind of voice that commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals. But to Carmen, he was just another passenger, and she appreciated his politeness. As Carmen moved away, Dante noticed the commotion at the front of the cabin. A tall man with silver hair was arguing loudly with the gate agent who had followed him onto the plane. The man's voice carried clearly through the cabin, and every word dripped with entitlement. "I don't care what your computer says," the man barked. "I always sit in 1A. It's my lucky seat. I have a $1 billion merger in London tomorrow, and I am not sitting anywhere else like some animal." This was Bradford Kane, and he represented everything Dante had fought against his entire life. At 52, Bradford had never worked a real day in his life. He had inherited his position at Kane Holdings from his father, just as his father had inherited it from his grandfather. The Kane family fortune had been built on shrewd investments and careful networking, but Bradford possessed neither his grandfather's intelligence nor his father's business instincts. What he did have was an unshakable belief that his money made him better than everyone else. Bradford was flanked by his two assistants, Maria Santos, a nervous Hispanic woman in her 30s who had learned to anticipate his moods and manage his schedule with military precision, and David Walsh, a pale white man who served as Bradford's personal yes man and enabler. Mr. Kane, the gate agent, said consulting her tablet seat, 1A was reserved weeks ago by another passenger. We have 2B available for you, which has identical amenities. I don't want identical amenities, Bradford interrupted, his voice rising. I want my seat. The seat I've sat in for 15 years. The seat my father sat in before me. Carmen exchanged glances with Elena Vasquez, the lead purser. Elena was 35, a former Air Force sergeant who had served 2 tours overseas before transitioning to civilian aviation. She believed in fairness and protocol, but she also understood the airline industry's unwritten rule: keep the high-value customers happy at all costs. Captain Williams emerged from the cockpit drawn by the commotion. At 45, he was a 20-year veteran of commercial aviation who had learned that wealthy passengers could make or break a pilot's career with a single complaint. He approached Bradford with the practiced deference of someone who knew which side his bread was buttered on. Mr. Kane. I'm Captain Williams. Is there a problem? Yes, there's a problem, Bradford said, pointing toward seat 2A. Someone is in my seat. Captain Williams looked where Bradford was pointing and saw Dante, who was calmly reading his newspaper and appeared completely unaware of the drama unfolding around him. Sir Captain Williams said to Dante, I'm going to need to see your boarding pass. Dante looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. Is there a problem? Captain Mr. Kane here says you're in his seat. Dante glanced at Bradford, then back at the captain. Mr. Kane is mistaken. I'm in seat 2A, which is clearly printed on my boarding pass. Bradford pushed past Captain Williams and loomed over Dante. Look, pal, I don't know how you got that boarding pass, but this is my seat. I've been flying this route for 15 years. And I paid full price for this seat 3 weeks ago, Dante replied evenly. Bradford laughed a short, sharp bark of derision. He pulled out his money clip, a gold-plated monstrosity engraved with the Kane family crest. I know how this works, he said, peeling off 10 $100 bills. You got lucky with an upgrade. Used some miles, maybe. Here's $1,000. Take it and move to coach where you belong. The cabin fell silent. Every passenger in first class turned to watch. Carmen felt her stomach clench as she witnessed the casual racism playing out in front of her. Elena stepped forward, her military training telling her this was wrong, but her airline training telling her to avoid conflict with VIP passengers. Dante looked at the money Bradford had dropped on his lap, then brushed it off with the back of his hand. The bills fluttered to the floor like autumn leaves. Pick that up, Dante said softly. Excuse me. Bradford's face began to turn red. You dropped your litter, Dante said, his voice never rising above conversational level. And as for the seat, I paid full fare. I'm comfortable. Please find your assigned seat so we can depart. Bradford turned to Captain Williams, his face now a dangerous shade of crimson. Get the authorities. Get security. I want this man removed. He's being aggressive and threatening. Carmen couldn't stay quiet any longer. Sir, he hasn't done anything aggressive. He's been sitting quietly reading his paper. Bradford whirled on her. Did I ask for your opinion? Know your place. That's when Elena Vasquez stepped forward, her military bearing evident in every movement. Mr. Kane, I'm going to ask you to lower your voice and return to your assigned seat. You're disrupting the other passengers. Disrupting Bradford's voice rose to a near shout. I'm a Platinum Elite member. My family has been flying Sovereign Airways since before this airline even existed. I don't get disrupted. I get results. Jake Morrison, a 29-year-old tech blogger in Seat 4B, had started recording the moment Bradford began shouting. He was live streaming to his 50,000 followers, and the viewer count was climbing rapidly. Sophia Martinez, a travel influencer with over 200,000 Instagram followers, had also begun recording. She held her phone steady as she whispered commentary. This is happening live on Platinum Airways Flight 447. First-class passenger being racially profiled right now. Bradford noticed the phones and his anger intensified. Put those away. This is a private matter, actually, Jake said calmly. We're in a public space and you're creating a public disturbance. The people have a right to know how Platinum Airways treats its passengers. Bradford turned back to Captain Williams. I want security. Now. Remove this man and confiscate those phones. Captain Williams was caught between competing pressures. Bradford Kane represented millions in annual revenue for the airline. His family's investment firm held significant positions in several hospitality and travel companies. On the other hand, Dante had done nothing wrong, and the situation was being recorded and broadcast to thousands of viewers. Sir Captain Williams said to Dante, perhaps we could find you another first-class seat. As a gesture of goodwill. I don't want goodwill, Dante replied. I want the seat I paid for. Bradford leaned down and spoke in a voice that carried throughout the cabin. You think because you scraped together enough money for one first-class ticket that you belong here. You don't. People like you will never belong here no matter how much you pretend. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Carmen felt tears prick her eyes. Elena's hands clenched into fists. Even some of the other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Dante looked up at Bradford with eyes that held the calm before a storm. Mr. Kane, you're about to make the biggest mistake of your life. Is that a threat? Bradford asked, his voice theatrical. No, Dante said quietly. It's a promise. The tension in the cabin was electric. Bradford's assistants, Maria and David, exchanged worried glances. They had seen their boss's temper before, but never directed at someone who seemed so completely unimpressed by his wealth and status. Captain Williams made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his career. Sir, he said to Dante, I'm going to have to ask you to move to another seat. Mr. Kane is a valued customer, and we need to resolve this situation. Dante stood slowly, his 6'2" frame unfolding with deliberate precision. He wasn't moving to comply. He was preparing to make a statement that would echo through the business world for years to come. Captain Williams, Dante said, his voice carrying clearly through the cabin. You're about to learn the difference between a customer and an owner. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. It was a custom device, matte black with military-grade encryption. As he unlocked it with his biometric signature, the screen displayed a contact list that read like a Fortune 500 directory. Bradford laughed. What are you going to do? Tweet about it. Dante scrolled to a contact labeled Montgomery Richard, CEO Platinum Airways, and held his thumb over the call button. Last chance to apologize, Mr. Kane. Bradford's laugh grew louder. Apologize. To you, I don't think so. Security, he called out. Remove this troublemaker from first class immediately. Dante's thumb pressed down on the call button. The phone rang once. Twice. On the third ring, a voice answered that would change everything. Richard Montgomery speaking. The voice came through Dante's phone with perfect clarity, and in the hushed cabin of Flight 447, every word was audible. Richard Montgomery was the CEO of Platinum Airways, the man whose company was 48 hours away from bankruptcy without Dante's intervention. Richard. It's Dante Rivers from Apex Financial. The change in the cabin atmosphere was immediate and dramatic. Captain Williams went white as snow. Elena Vasquez's eyes widened in recognition. Even Bradford Kane, whose business knowledge was limited but not non-existent, recognized the name that had been splashed across financial headlines for the past decade. Mr. Rivers Montgomery's voice crackled through the speaker with obvious relief. Thank God you're calling. The board meeting is tomorrow, and we're counting on your support. Is everything ready for the signing? There's been a complication, Richard. Bradford's smug expression began to waver. The name Dante Rivers was starting to penetrate his consciousness, and with it came the dawning realization that he might have made a catastrophic error. What kind of complication? Montgomery's voice carried a note of panic that everyone in the cabin could hear. Your crew has just racially profiled and attempted to remove your airline's primary investor from his paid first-class seat. The silence that followed was so complete that the only sound was the gentle hum of the aircraft's engines. Bradford's face went through a spectrum of colors from red to white to a sickly green. Captain Williams looked like he was about to vomit. Sir Montgomery's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Please tell me you're joking. I wish I were Richard. Mr. Bradford Kane here believes that people like me don't belong in first class. He's offered me money to move to coach and demanded that your captain have me removed by security. Bradford finally found his voice. Wait, you can't be... Dante Rivers, CEO of Apex Financial Holdings. The man whose $350 million is the only thing standing between Platinum Airways and bankruptcy court. Jake Morrison's live stream had exploded. His viewer count had jumped to over 100,000 as word spread across social media. Comments were flooding in faster than he could read them. The hashtags Platinum Airways Flight 437 and Dante Rivers were trending on Twitter. Sophia Martinez had switched from Instagram to TikTok, where her video was being shared at a viral rate. Y'all, she whispered to her phone, we are witnessing the most epic takedown in aviation history. Carmen Rodriguez stood frozen, her serving tray forgotten in her hands. She had spent 3 years working for Platinum Airways, enduring difficult passengers and long hours, but she had never seen anything like this. She thought about her daughter at home, about the nursing school textbooks she studied during her breaks, about all the times she had been told to just smile and serve when passengers treated her badly. Elena Vasquez felt her military training warring with her corporate conditioning. Everything she had learned in the Air Force told her that Bradford's behavior was unacceptable, but 3 years in the airline industry had taught her that wealthy passengers were untouchable. Mr. Rivers Montgomery's voice came through the speaker again. I am personally flying to New York to handle this situation. Please, whatever you need. What I need, Richard, is for your crew to remember that racism isn't customer service and that my money doesn't change color based on what I'm wearing. Bradford attempted one last desperate gambit. This is all a misunderstanding. I never said anything about race. I simply requested my usual seat. The seat you just told me I'll never belong in, no matter how much I pretend. Dante's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath the silk. The seat you offered me $1,000 to vacate, so I could sit in the back where I belong. Maria Santos Bradford's Hispanic assistant had been recording the entire exchange on her phone. Not because she wanted to protect her boss, but because she wanted evidence of what she had witnessed. For 2 years, she had endured Bradford's casual racism and constant belittling, always afraid to speak up because she needed the job. But watching him humiliate an innocent man had finally broken something inside her. David Walsh, Bradford's other assistant, was frantically texting someone, probably trying to warn the Kane Holdings board about the developing crisis. His hands shook as he typed, knowing that his boss's career might be ending in real time. Sir Captain Williams said, his voice barely above a whisper, I deeply apologize. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Captain, was your assumption that a black man in casual clothes couldn't possibly afford a first-class seat on your airline. Jake Morrison provided live commentary for his viewers. Ladies and gentlemen, we're watching a masterclass in how to handle racism. This man hasn't raised his voice once, but he's about to bring down an entire airline with his dignity. Other first-class passengers had begun recording as well. A businessman in seat 3A was live streaming to his LinkedIn connections. A tech executive in seat 5B was posting to her company's Slack channel. The story was spreading across multiple platforms simultaneously. Bradford made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Mr. Rivers, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Perhaps we could discuss this like gentlemen. Gentlemen. Dante's eyebrow arched slightly. 5 minutes ago, you told me to take a bus instead of flying. You called me a troublemaker and demanded security remove me. Exactly which part of your behavior would you classify as gentlemanly? I was protecting my investment. Kane Holdings has significant positions in travel and hospitality companies. I can't be seen being racist in public. Dante finished. Yes, I imagine that would be bad for business. Montgomery's voice crackled through the speaker again. Mr. Rivers, please tell me what I can do to resolve this situation. Platinum Airways values every passenger, and we have zero tolerance for discrimination. Interesting policy, Richard. Your crew seem to have a different understanding. Carmen Rodriguez stepped forward, her voice shaking but determined. Mr. Rivers, sir, I want you to know that not everyone here agrees with what happened. What Mr. Kane did was wrong. Bradford rounded on her. You need to stay in your lane, sweetheart. This doesn't concern you. Actually, Elena Vasquez said her military bearing evident as she stepped beside Carmen, it concerns all of us. I've been flying for 15 years, and I've never been more ashamed of how we've treated a passenger. Captain Williams realized that his crew was abandoning ship, and he made a desperate play to save his career. Mr. Rivers, on behalf of Platinum Airways, I offer our sincerest apologies. If you could find it in your heart to forgive this incident. Forgiveness is earned, Captain, and so far nobody has earned it. The viral spread of the incident was accelerating beyond anyone's control. Jake Morrison's live stream had reached over 200,000 viewers. Sofia Martinez's TikTok had been shared 10,000 times in less than 10 minutes. The story had jumped from social media to news aggregators, and from there to major news outlets. Bradford's phone began buzzing with calls and texts. The first was from his father, the second from the Kane Holdings board chairman, and the third from their crisis management team. Each call that he ignored seemed to make his situation worse. Mr. Kane Dante said, his voice cutting through the chaos, you have a choice to make. You can apologize sincerely for your behavior and perhaps salvage some dignity, or you can continue to dig yourself deeper into the hole you've created. I don't owe you anything, Bradford snarled, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. My family has been powerful in this city since before you were born. Your family's power is built on money, Mr. Kane, and as of this moment, that money is walking away from you. Dante turned his attention back to his phone. Richard, are you still there? Yes, sir. I'm here. I'm going to put you on speaker so everyone can hear this clearly. Dante touched the speaker button, and Montgomery's voice filled the cabin. Mr. Rivers, please tell me what Platinum Airways can do to make this right. You can start by explaining to your crew why treating passengers differently based on their race is unacceptable, regardless of how much money other passengers claim to spend with your airline. Absolutely, sir. That goes without saying. Does it, Richard? Because your captain just told me that Mr. Kane is a valued customer and that I should move to accommodate him. Your purser stood by silently while he offered me money to move to coach. Your flight attendant was the only one who tried to do the right thing. Carmen felt tears welling in her eyes. In 3 years with the airline, no passenger had ever defended her, especially not against a VIP customer. Sir Montgomery continued, "I want you to know that this incident will be thoroughly investigated and appropriate action will be taken. The investigation is already complete, Richard. Everyone in this cabin witnessed it. The question now is what you're going to do about it." Bradford's assistant, Maria Santos, stepped forward. Her hands were trembling, but her voice was steady. "Mr. Rivers, I recorded everything that happened. Every word Mr. Kane said, every action he took. If you need the evidence..." Bradford spun toward her, his face contorted with rage. "You're fired. Pack your things and get out." "Actually," Maria said, holding up her phone, "I think you'll find that you no longer have the authority to fire anyone." The livestream viewers had grown to over 500,000 across all platforms. Seatgate was trending #1 on Twitter. News vans were already being dispatched to JFK and Heathrow airports. The story had taken on a life of its own. Bradford's phone rang again. This time he answered it. "Bradford, what the hell is going on?" The voice was loud enough for several nearby passengers to hear. It was his father, Kane Holdings founder, William Kane. "Dad, there's been a misunderstanding. The entire internet is watching you destroy our company." Bradford moved away from the crowd, but in the confined space of the aircraft cabin, privacy was impossible. "It's not that bad, Dad. It's just..." "Just what?" "Just you calling a billionaire investor a thug on live television? Do you have any idea how much money we stand to lose? I didn't know who he was." "That's not the point, you idiot. The point is that you judged him based on his skin color, and now the whole world knows it." The phone call ended abruptly. Bradford stared at his phone for a moment, then slowly raised his eyes to find every person in the cabin watching him. The weight of his situation was finally beginning to penetrate his entitled worldview. Dante had remained calm throughout the chaos, but now he spoke with a quiet authority that commanded attention. "Mr. Kane, 25 years ago, your father's bank denied me a business loan. He told me that people like me were too high risk for serious investment. That rejection motivated me to build a company that is now worth more than your entire family fortune." Bradford's jaw dropped. The pieces were clicking into place. "Today, you've repeated your father's mistake. The difference is that 25 years ago I had no power to respond. Today I do." Dante scrolled through his phone contacts again, this time finding a number labeled Kane Holdings. "William Kane." "No," Bradford whispered. "Please don't." Dante's finger hovered over the call button. "You have 30 seconds to apologize to every person in this cabin for your behavior, starting with Carmen, the flight attendant, who tried to defend basic human decency while your fellow crew members chose profits over principles." The entire cabin held its breath. Bradford looked around at the faces watching him. Some angry, some pitying, all waiting to see if he would finally choose humility over hubris. The countdown had begun. Bradford Kane stood in the aisle of Flight 447, surrounded by hundreds of thousands of viewers watching through multiple live streams, facing the wreckage of his privilege and the countdown of his family's empire. His silver hair, perfectly styled an hour ago, now showed traces of perspiration. His bespoke suit, which had made him feel invincible when he boarded, now felt like armor that was too heavy to carry. Dante Rivers sat calmly in seat 2A, his phone displaying his father's number, his thumb poised like a weapon of financial destruction. The power dynamic in the cabin had shifted so completely that the air itself seemed to carry a different charge. 25 seconds, Mr. Kane." Bradford looked at Carmen Rodriguez, the young flight attendant, whose only crime had been trying to do her job with dignity. She stood with her back straight, her dark eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and resignation. She had spent 3 years accepting that wealthy passengers could treat her however they wanted, because she needed the job to support her daughter and pay for nursing school. 20 seconds. Elena Vasquez, the former Air Force sergeant, watched Bradford with the same expression she had worn while dealing with hostile forces overseas. She knew courage when she saw it and cowardice too. Right now, she was witnessing the latter. 15 seconds. Captain Williams realized that his 20-year career was hanging in the balance. Every decision he had made in the past 30 minutes had been wrong, and now he was watching a passenger count down to his professional execution. 10 seconds. Jake Morrison provided real-time commentary to his viewers. Bradford Kane, heir to a century-old investment firm, has 10 seconds to apologize or watch his family's empire crumble on live television. This is the most intense thing I've ever witnessed. 5 seconds. Bradford opened his mouth, but no words came out. Years of entitlement had taught him that apologies were for other people, that his money and status meant never having to admit he was wrong. The words physically would not form. Time's up. Dante's thumb pressed the call button. The phone rang once. William Kane answered immediately. Rivers. Is this some kind of sick joke? Hello, William. This is Dante Rivers. I believe you remember me. There was a long pause. When William Kane spoke again, his voice was strained. That was business, Rivers. Nothing personal. Everything is personal when it's about human dignity. Your son just spent the last hour proving that the apple didn't fall far from the tree. What do you want? I want you to listen. Dante activated the speaker function, and William Kane's voice filled the cabin. Your son Bradford just attempted to have me removed from a first-class seat I purchased with my own money. He offered me cash to move to coach where I belong, called me a troublemaker, and demanded security treat me like a criminal. All because I'm a black man who doesn't dress the way he thinks billionaires should dress. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Dad Bradford's voice cracked. Dad, it wasn't like that. Shut up, Bradford. Just shut up. William Kane's breathing was audible through the phone speaker. When he spoke again, his voice was hollow. Mr. Rivers, my son is an idiot, but he's my idiot. What do you want from us? I want you to listen to what happens next. Dante scrolled to another contact, Goldman Sachs, Investment Portfolio Management. Bradford watched in horror as Dante placed the call. Peterson speaking. Jim, it's Dante Rivers. I need you to execute an immediate portfolio adjustment. Of course, Mr. Rivers. What are your instructions? Liquidate all positions in Kane Holdings immediately. Convert to cash and wire to our emergency acquisition fund. Bradford felt his knees buckle. Goldman Sachs was one of Kane Holdings' largest institutional investors, and Dante controlled a significant portion of their investment decisions through Apex Financial. Sir, that's approximately $67 million in Kane Holdings stock. Are you sure you want to move that quickly? There will be significant market impact. I'm counting on it. Bradford grabbed the phone from his assistant, David Walsh, and frantically dialed his company's trading floor. Emergency sell alert, he shouted into the phone. Apex Financial is dumping Kane Holdings. Get me the chairman. Get me the board. Stop all trading. But it was too late. Dante had already ended the call with Goldman Sachs and was dialing another number. Blackstone Equity Partners. Mr. Rivers, good to hear from you. Marcus, I need a favor. Kane Holdings is about to be available at a significant discount. Are you interested in a hostile takeover? Bradford's face went completely white. Blackstone Equity Partners specialized in acquiring distressed companies and either rebuilding them or dismantling them for parts. They were corporate predators, and Kane Holdings was about to become prey. Always interested in your recommendations, sir. What's the situation? Let's just say that Kane Holdings is about to learn that racism is expensive. I'll send you the details within the hour. Bradford tried to grab the phone from Dante's hands. Stop. You can't do this. My family has built this company for over a century, and your family has torn it down in 30 minutes, Dante replied calmly. Maria Santos, who was still recording everything, spoke up. "Mr. Kane, you had the chance to apologize. Mr. Rivers gave you multiple opportunities to do the right thing." "Nobody asked you," Bradford snarled, spinning toward his assistant. "Actually," Maria said, her voice growing stronger, "I think it's time someone told you the truth about yourself." She held up her phone, showing the live stream that was now being watched by over 800,000 people. "For 2 years I've listened to you make racist comments about clients, employees, and service workers. I've watched you humiliate people because you could. I've stayed quiet because I needed the job, but I've recorded everything." Bradford's assistant, David Walsh, stepped away from his boss, reading something on his phone. "Bradford," David said quietly, "Kane Holdings stock just dropped 18%. Trading has been halted." The news hit Bradford like a physical blow. He staggered backward and collapsed into an empty seat. Captain Williams, realizing that his career was over regardless, decided to try salvaging what remained of his dignity. "Mr. Rivers, I owe you a personal apology. I allowed my judgment to be clouded by considerations that have no place in professional aviation. You paid for your seat, you've behaved with perfect civility, and you deserved better treatment from me and my crew." Elena Vasquez nodded in agreement. "Sir, I want to apologize as well. I knew what was happening was wrong, but I failed to act on my convictions." Carmen Rodriguez stepped forward. "Rivers, I don't have much power in this situation, but I want you to know that what happened here today was wrong, and I'm sorry you had to experience it." Dante looked at each of them in turn. "Thank you. All of you. Apologies matter, especially when they come from people who have the courage to admit their mistakes." He turned his attention back to Bradford, who was slumped in his seat like a deflated balloon. "Mr. Kane, you're the only person who hasn't apologized, and you're the one who started this entire situation." Bradford looked up with eyes that were finally showing the first signs of genuine fear. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. You meant every word. You judged me based on my skin color, decided I didn't belong in your space, and attempted to use your privilege to remove me. The only thing you didn't mean to do was face consequences for your actions." Dante made another phone call, this time to someone who answered immediately. "Dante, what's going on? I just heard that Kane Holdings is in freefall." "Hello, Senator Richardson. I'm calling about the Transportation Equity Committee you've been forming." Senator Richardson was the chair of the Senate Commerce Committee and had been working on legislation to address discrimination in transportation for over 2 years. "I'm listening. I'm currently on Platinum Airways Flight 447, where I've just been subjected to racial discrimination by both a passenger and airline crew. The incident is being live-streamed to nearly 1 million viewers. I thought you might be interested in using this as a case study for your committee." "Are you serious?" "Completely. I'll have my office send you the video evidence within the hour." Bradford realized that the consequences of his actions were expanding beyond his personal and professional life into the realm of federal policy. His racism wasn't just destroying his family's fortune, it was about to become the poster child for anti-discrimination legislation. Jake Morrison continued his commentary. "Folks, what we're witnessing here is how one moment of prejudice can create ripple effects across multiple industries. This isn't just about an airline seat anymore. This is about accountability at the highest levels of American business." Sofia Martinez chimed in on her platform, "This is what happens when someone with real power decides they've had enough." Mr. Rivers isn't just fighting back. He's changing the game entirely. The other passengers in first class had become witnesses to history. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a surgeon traveling to London for a medical conference, had been texting her colleagues about what she was witnessing. "I've never seen anything like this," she murmured to her seat companion. "This man is single-handedly dismantling an entire company with nothing but phone calls and dignity." Bradford's phone buzzed with another call from his father. "Answer it," Dante said. "Put it on speaker." With shaking hands, Bradford answered the call. "Bradford, you need to come home immediately. The board is calling an emergency meeting. Blackstone just made an inquiry about acquisition possibilities." "Dad, I can fix this." "You can't fix anything. You've destroyed everything our family has built. The stock is worthless. Our clients are fleeing and the media is calling us a racist investment firm." William Kane's voice broke. "Your grandfather built this company from nothing. Your great-grandfather fought in World War II to defend the values you just trampled on. How could you do this to our family name?" Bradford tried to speak, but only a choking sound came out. "Mr. Rivers." William Kane continued through the speaker. "I know this doesn't undo what my son did, but I want you to know that his behavior doesn't represent our family's values. With respect, Mr. Kane." Dante replied, "Your son learned this behavior somewhere. Racism isn't spontaneous, it's taught." "You're right," William Kane admitted. "And that's something our family is going to have to reckon with." The admission hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Bradford Kane, heir to a fortune built over 3 generations, sat in the wreckage of his privilege, and finally understood that his actions had consequences that money couldn't erase. But Dante Rivers wasn't finished. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin of Flight 447 had transformed from luxury travel to courtroom drama, with Dante Rivers serving as judge, jury, and executioner. Bradford Kane sat slumped in an empty seat, watching his family's century-old empire crumble in real time through stock tickers and news alerts flooding his phone. But Dante had saved his most devastating move for last. Richard, Dante said, addressing the Platinum Airways CEO, who was still listening through the phone speaker. "I think it's time we discussed the future of our business relationship. Mr. Rivers, please. Whatever you need from Platinum Airways, we'll make it happen. This incident is completely unacceptable, and we'll take immediate action to ensure it never happens again." The problem, Richard, isn't just this incident. It's the culture that made this incident possible. Your captain immediately sided with the wealthy white passenger. Your purser stood by silently while I was being discriminated against. Your crew has been trained to prioritize profit over principles. Captain Williams felt sweat beading on his forehead. 20 years of perfect flight records, commendations from management, and glowing passenger reviews were about to be erased by 30 minutes of moral cowardice. Sir Montgomery's voice carried a note of desperation. "We can retrain the entire crew. We can implement new policies. We can make Platinum Airways a model for the industry. That's exactly what you're going to do, Richard. But not with my money." The words hit like a physical blow. Bradford jerked upright in his seat, suddenly realizing that his actions weren't just destroying his own company, they were killing the airline that had been his transportation lifeline for decades. "Sir, please reconsider," Montgomery begged. "Without your investment, Platinum Airways will cease operations within 48 hours. We have 30,000 employees who will lose their jobs. Those 30,000 employees deserve better leadership than what they currently have. They deserve to work for a company that treats all passengers with dignity, regardless of their appearance or background." Dante scrolled through his contacts and found a number that made Bradford's blood run cold. Horizon Aviation Group. Acquisition Department. Bradford knew Horizon Aviation. They were Platinum Airways' biggest competitor, and they had been circling like vultures for months, waiting for the struggling airline to weaken enough for a hostile takeover. "Mr. Rivers," Bradford said desperately, "you can't let Platinum Airways fail because of what I did. Those employees had nothing to do with this. You're absolutely right, Mr. Kane." "They didn't, which is why I'm going to make sure they have better leadership." Dante placed the call to Horizon Aviation. "Rivers, this is unexpected. Are you calling about the Platinum Airways situation?" The voice belonged to Catherine Marshall, CEO of Horizon Aviation and one of the most respected executives in the airline industry. She was known for running a company with strong diversity policies and zero tolerance for discrimination. "Hello, Catherine. Yes, I'm calling about Platinum Airways. As you know, they need immediate capital infusion to avoid bankruptcy. We've been monitoring the situation. Are you withdrawing your support? I'm redirecting it. Instead of funding Platinum Airways under their current management structure, I'm prepared to fund a complete acquisition and restructure under new leadership." Captain Williams looked like he was about to faint. Elena Vasquez closed her eyes, knowing that her job had just evaporated. Carmen Rodriguez felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. Fear for her immediate future, hope that change might be coming. "That's a substantial investment, Dante. We're talking about a $350 million acquisition plus restructuring costs. $400 million total. The extra $50 million is for a complete cultural overhaul. I want every employee retrained, new diversity policies implemented, and a passenger advocacy department created with real authority." Bradford jumped up from his seat. "You can't do this. This is my airline. My family has been loyal to Platinum Airways for 30 years. Dante looked at him with eyes that could have frozen mercury. "Your family's loyalty means nothing when it's built on the assumption that other passengers are beneath you." Jake Morrison provided live commentary to his viewers, who now numbered over 1 million. Ladies and gentlemen, we're watching Dante Rivers literally buy an airline to make sure racism has no place in the sky. This is the most incredible display of economic justice I've ever witnessed. Catherine Marshall continued the conversation. "Dante, this is a massive undertaking. What's your timeline immediate? I want Horizon Aviation to make an offer within the hour. The current Platinum Airways management has proven they're incapable of providing equal treatment to all passengers." Bradford's phone rang again. This time it was his uncle Jonathan Kane, who served on the Platinum Airways board of directors. "Bradford, what have you done? The entire board is in emergency session. They're talking about cutting all ties with Kane Holdings to avoid association with this scandal." Bradford answered on speaker, no longer caring who heard his family's conversations. "Uncle John, you can't let them do this. We've been invested in Platinum Airways since before I was born. We've been invested in a lot of things that we won't be invested in much longer if this continues. Do you understand that our reputation is radioactive right now? Companies are canceling contracts, investors are pulling out, and the media is calling us a racist organization." The full scope of Bradford's destruction was becoming clear. His moment of prejudice wasn't just affecting him personally or his family's business. It was creating shockwaves throughout entire industries. Maria Santos continued recording while providing her own commentary. "For 2 years, I watched this man treat people like objects. Today, the world is watching him face the consequences." David Walsh, Bradford's remaining assistant, was frantically typing on his phone. "Bradford, the crisis management team is recommending immediate resignation from all board positions and a public apology tour." "I'm not resigning anything," Sir David said quietly. "You may not have a choice. The board can vote you out." Dante finished his conversation with Catherine Marshall and turned his attention back to the cabin. "The acquisition offer will be submitted within the hour. Horizon Aviation will purchase Platinum Airways assets and assume responsibility for all employees. However, there will be changes." Carmen Rodriguez stepped forward nervously. "Mr. Rivers, what kind of changes?" "Changes that ensure what happened today never happens again. Every employee will receive comprehensive training on unconscious bias and cultural sensitivity. There will be a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, and there will be a new position created, Director of Passenger Advocacy, with authority to overrule any crew member or manager who prioritizes status over basic human dignity." Elena Vasquez felt a spark of hope. "Sir, would that position be open to current Platinum Airways employees?" "It would be open to employees who demonstrate the courage to do the right thing even when it's difficult." Captain Williams realized this was his last chance to salvage something from the wreckage of his career. "Mr. Rivers, I know I failed you today. I let my concern for accommodating a VIP passenger override my obligation to treat all passengers fairly. If you're willing to give me a second chance, I promise to do better. Captain Williams' acknowledgement is the first step toward change. But words are easy. Actions matter more. Dante made another call this time to his legal team. Jennifer, I need you to draft a comprehensive anti-discrimination policy for airline personnel. It should include mandatory reporting procedures, regular audits, and significant penalties for violations. Bradford watched in fascination and horror as Dante methodically dismantled and rebuilt an entire industry around him. Each phone call was precise, purposeful, and devastating in its efficiency. Furthermore, Dante continued, I want you to establish a passenger advocacy fund. Any airline employee who reports discrimination will receive legal protection and financial support if they face retaliation. The live stream comments were pouring in from around the world. Viewers were sharing their own stories of discrimination in travel, lodging, and service industries. The conversation had expanded beyond one incident on one flight to a broader discussion about dignity, respect, and accountability. Bradford made one final desperate attempt to appeal to Dante's business sense. Mr. Rivers, you're destroying billions of dollars in value. Think about the shareholders, the employees, the economic impact. Is your hurt pride really worth all this destruction? Dante stood up slowly, his full 6'2" frame commanding the space around him. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of a man who had built an empire from nothing and wasn't about to let racism tear down what he had achieved. Mr. Kane, this isn't about hurt pride. This is about human dignity. You assumed that because I'm black and dressed casually, I must be inferior to you. You treated me like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. That assumption has cost you everything, and it should. He paused, letting the words sink in. 25 years ago, your father made the same assumption. He denied me a loan because people like me were too high risk. That rejection motivated me to build something that could never be denied or dismissed. Today, you've given me the opportunity to use that power for something larger than profit. Bradford's phone buzzed with a news alert: Kane Holdings stock suspended from trading after 40%. Drop in single day. Your family's fortune was built on the assumption that your wealth made you better than other people. Today, the market has decided that assumption was wrong. The cabin fell silent, except for the gentle hum of the engines and the soft clicking of passengers typing on their phones, sharing the moment with the world. Bradford Kane sat in the ruins of his privilege, finally understanding that money without character is just paper with pictures on it. But Dante Rivers still had one more call to make. Dante Rivers held his phone with the calm precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel, each call surgically removing another piece of Bradford Kane's empire. The cabin of Flight 447 had become a courtroom where justice was being served in real time, witnessed by over 1.2 million viewers across multiple platforms. One more call, Mr. Kane. Dante said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute finality. He scrolled to a contact that made Bradford's remaining color drain completely from his face. Securities and Exchange Commission, Investigation Department. No, Bradford whispered. Please, you've made your point. My family is ruined. The airline is sold. My reputation is destroyed. What more do you want? I want accountability, Dante replied simply. Real accountability. He placed the call. SEC Investigation Division. Agent Patricia Hernandez speaking. Agent Hernandez, this is Dante Rivers from Apex Financial Holdings. I need to report potential securities fraud and market manipulation related to Kane Holdings. Bradford jumped up from his seat so violently that he knocked over Carmen's serving cart. That's not fraud. That's just business. Sir Agent Hernandez said, "Can you clarify the nature of the suspected violations? Kane Holdings has been artificially inflating their portfolio value by making false claims about their investment positions and client relationships. I have evidence that they've been using racist lending and investment practices to discriminate against minority-owned businesses while claiming diversity compliance for regulatory purposes." Maria Santos stepped forward holding her phone. Agent Hernandez: "I'm Maria Santos, former assistant to Bradford Kane. I have 2 years of recorded conversations, emails, and documents that support these allegations." Bradford spun toward her, his face contorted with rage. "You recorded me. You were supposed to be loyal." "I was loyal to the truth," Maria replied. "And the truth is that Kane Holdings has been discriminating against minority clients while reporting false diversity metrics to regulators." The live stream comments exploded as viewers realized they were witnessing not just a personal confrontation, but the exposure of potential federal crimes. Jake Morrison provided real-time analysis to his audience. "Folks, this has just escalated from airline discrimination to potential securities fraud. We're watching corporate accountability happen in real time." Agent Hernandez continued her questioning. "Ms. Santos, are you willing to provide this evidence to federal investigators?" "Yes, ma'am. I've already uploaded everything to a secure server. Kane Holdings has been lying to investors, regulators, and the public about their business practices." Captain Williams, who had been listening in growing horror, realized that his problems had just become microscopic compared to Bradford's. "Mr. Rivers, Agent Hernandez said we'll need formal statements from all parties. Given the public nature of this incident, we'll be opening an immediate investigation." Bradford collapsed back into his seat, his phone buzzing with calls from lawyers, family members, and board members. Each call brought worse news than the last. Elena Vasquez, the former Air Force sergeant turned purser, stepped forward with military precision. "Mr. Rivers, I want to formally apologize for my failure to act on my principles today. In the military, we're taught that silence in the face of injustice is complicity. I failed that standard." "Thank you, Elena. Acknowledgement takes courage." Carmen Rodriguez spoke next, her voice stronger now than it had been all day. "Sir, I want to thank you for showing me that standing up for what's right matters even when it's scary. I've been afraid to speak up because I needed this job. But watching you today taught me that some things are more important than fear." The phone conversation with Agent Hernandez continued on speaker, ensuring that all 1.2 million viewers could hear every word of the developing federal investigation. "Mr. Kane, you'll need to report to our New York field office within 48 hours for questioning. Failure to comply will result in a federal warrant for your arrest." Bradford tried one last, desperate gambit. "This is all a misunderstanding. I was just trying to get my regular seat. This man is using his wealth to destroy me out of spite." Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the surgeon who had been quietly observing from seat 4A, spoke up. "Mr. Kane, I've been recording this entire incident for my own protection as a witness. You repeatedly used racially charged language, offered money to make Mr. Rivers move to coach, and demanded his removal based solely on his appearance. There's no misunderstanding here. Jake Morrison's live stream had attracted attention from major news networks. His viewer count showed that CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and BBC were all monitoring his feed. The story had jumped from social media to mainstream media in real time. Sofia Martinez provided cultural commentary to her audience. "What we're seeing here is bigger than one racist passenger. We're watching someone with real power use that power to create actual change, instead of just complaining about injustice." Dante made another call, this time to someone whose name made Bradford's remaining hope evaporate entirely. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. DOJ Civil Rights Attorney Williams speaking. "Attorney Williams, this is Dante Rivers. I'm reporting a federal civil rights violation that occurred on a commercial aircraft. The incident has been recorded by multiple witnesses and is currently being viewed by over 1 million people on social media. Sir, can you provide details about the nature of the violation? I was subjected to racial discrimination by both a passenger and airline crew members who attempted to remove me from a seat I had legally purchased based solely on my race and appearance. Bradford's Uncle Jonathan called back, his voice panicked. Bradford, the FBI just called the office. They want to interview the entire board about our lending practices. What have you done to us? The ripple effects were expanding exponentially. Bradford's moment of racism had triggered investigations that would examine decades of potentially discriminatory business practices. David Walsh, Bradford's remaining assistant, quietly approached Dante. Mr. Rivers, I want to apologize for my silence today. I should have spoken up when I saw what was happening. It's not too late to do the right thing now, Dante replied. David nodded and pulled out his phone. Agent Hernandez, this is David Walsh. I also have evidence of discriminatory practices at Kane Holdings. I'd like to cooperate with your investigation. Bradford watched his final ally abandon him, completing his isolation. The Federal Aviation Administration contacted the aircraft through air traffic control. Captain Williams received a message that made his hands shake. Flight 447, be advised that FAA investigators will meet your aircraft upon arrival at JFK. This is related to civil rights violations reported during your flight. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Williams announced over the intercom, his voice barely steady. We've been instructed to return to JFK Airport for an investigation. The FAA will be meeting our aircraft upon arrival. The passengers who weren't involved in the incident began expressing their support for Dante. Dr. Walsh started a spontaneous round of applause that spread throughout the first-class cabin. This is amazing, said Robert Chen, a tech executive in seat 6B. I've never seen someone handle racism with such dignity and effectiveness. Bradford's phone rang one final time. The caller ID showed Kane Holdings board chairman. Answer it, Dante said. Put it on speaker. With trembling hands, Bradford answered the call. Bradford, this is an emergency board meeting. You are hereby removed from all positions with Kane Holdings effective immediately. Your behavior has exposed the company to federal investigation and destroyed our reputation. Security will escort you from all company properties. You can't do this. I'm family. Family doesn't destroy 3 generations of work in 30 minutes, the chairman replied coldly. Your father is tendering his resignation as well. The Kane family's association with this company is over. The line went dead. Bradford Kane sat in the wreckage of his privilege, staring at a phone that had once connected him to unlimited power and now connected him to nothing but consequences. Carmen Rodriguez approached Dante with tears in her eyes. Mr. Rivers, I don't know how to thank you. You stood up not just for yourself, but for every service worker who's ever been treated as less than human by wealthy passengers. Carmen, you stood up too. That matters. Elena Vasquez straightened her posture. Sir, when Horizon Aviation takes over, I'd like to apply for that Director of Passenger Advocacy position. This incident taught me that I'd rather lose my job fighting for what's right than keep it by staying silent. I'll make sure they know you're interested. The live stream had become a global phenomenon. Seatgate was trending in 12 countries. News organizations were scrambling to get reporters to both JFK and Heathrow airports. Jake Morrison concluded his broadcast. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just witnessed history. One man's quiet dignity has taken down a racist investment firm, triggered multiple federal investigations, and is about to transform an entire airline. This is what accountability looks like in the 21st century. As Flight 447 began its descent back to JFK Airport, Bradford Kane sat alone, abandoned by his assistants, his family, and his fortune. His racism had cost him everything, and everyone in the cabin knew it. But for Dante Rivers, the real work was just beginning. 6 weeks after Flight 447's emergency return to JFK Airport, The aviation industry was still reeling from what media outlets had dubbed the seat heard round the world. Federal investigations had expanded beyond Kane Holdings to examine discrimination practices across multiple industries, and Dante Rivers had emerged as an unlikely champion for civil rights in corporate America. The Horizon Aviation acquisition of Platinum Airways had been completed within 72 hours, setting a record for the speed of a major airline purchase. The renamed company Unity Airlines had become a case study in rapid corporate transformation. Carmen Rodriguez stood in her new office at Unity Airlines headquarters, reviewing training materials for the company's revolutionary passenger advocacy program. 6 weeks ago, she had been a single mother working 3 jobs to pay for nursing school. Today, she was the director of passenger advocacy for a major airline with the authority to override any crew member or manager who failed to treat passengers with dignity. Her first week in the position had been overwhelming. The phone rang constantly with calls from passengers reporting discrimination incidents at other airlines, service workers seeking advice on how to handle bias from customers and journalists wanting to interview the flight attendant who had stood up to racism at 30,000 feet. Elena Vasquez, now serving as Carmen's deputy director, knocked on the door. "Carmen, the training video is ready for your review." The video featured real employees sharing their experiences and explaining Unity Airlines' zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Every employee, from baggage handlers to pilots, was required to complete 40 hours of bias awareness training and attend quarterly refresher sessions. "How are the employee satisfaction scores?" Carmen asked. "Up 37% since the changeover. Turns out people like working for a company that has actual values instead of just slogans." Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the surgeon who had witnessed the original incident, had become an unofficial spokesperson for passenger rights. She appeared regularly on news programs, explaining how discrimination in travel affected not just individual victims, but the broader culture of customer service. "What people don't understand," she said during a CNN interview, "is that racism isn't just about individual prejudice. It's about power structures that allow some people to dehumanize others without consequences. What Dante Rivers did was use his power to change those structures." The federal investigations triggered by Bradford's behavior had expanded far beyond Kane Holdings. The Securities and Exchange Commission had uncovered a pattern of discriminatory lending practices that affected dozens of minority-owned businesses. The Department of Justice had filed civil rights violations against 3 major financial institutions. Maria Santos Bradford's former assistant had been granted whistleblower protection and testified before Congress about the culture of discrimination she had witnessed in the financial industry. "For 2 years, I recorded conversations where minority loan applicants were referred to using racial slurs," she told the House Financial Services Committee. "I documented emails where investment decisions were made based on the race of business owners rather than their financial qualifications. I stayed silent because I was afraid, but the courage I saw from Mr. Rivers on that airplane inspired me to finally speak the truth." Bradford Kane himself had become a cautionary tale studied in business schools across the country. After being criminally charged with securities fraud and civil rights violations, he had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and ordered to pay $12 million in restitution to affected businesses. His family's investment firm had been dissolved, its assets distributed to victims of discriminatory lending practices. The Kane name, once associated with old money prestige, was now synonymous with the consequences of institutional racism. Jake Morrison, the tech blogger whose live stream had captured the original incident, had parlayed his viral fame into a career as a civil rights journalist. His documentary about the aftermath of Flight 447, titled "Turbulence: How One Flight Changed American Business," had won a Peabody Award. The most remarkable thing about Dante Rivers Morrison said during his acceptance speech is that he didn't seek revenge. He sought reform. He used his power not to destroy his enemies, but to build a better system for everyone. Sofia Martinez had used her platform to highlight discrimination in the hospitality industry, leading to policy changes at major hotel chains and restaurant groups. Her follow-up videos tracking the implementation of new diversity policies had garnered millions of views. "Change doesn't happen because people feel guilty," she explained in one video. "Change happens because someone with real power decides to use that power responsibly." The transportation industry had been transformed by what became known as the Unity Standard, a set of policies and procedures that ensured equal treatment for all passengers regardless of race, gender, religion, or economic status. Within 6 months of the Flight 447 incident, 12 major airlines had adopted similar policies. Captain Williams, the pilot who had initially sided with Bradford, had undergone extensive retraining and become an advocate for bias awareness in aviation. He now spoke at pilot training programs about the importance of treating all passengers equally. "I let my desire to please a wealthy customer override my obligation to treat all passengers fairly," he told a room full of new pilots. "That decision almost destroyed my career and definitely damaged my integrity. Don't make the same mistake I did." The ripple effects extended beyond transportation. The retail industry implemented new training programs after several high-profile incidents of racial profiling in stores. The hospitality sector revised policies after investigations revealed widespread discrimination against minority guests. Unity Airlines had become the most profitable major carrier in North America, proving that treating customers with dignity was not only morally right, but financially beneficial. Customer satisfaction scores consistently ranked highest in the industry, and employee retention rates had improved dramatically. Dante Rivers had used his influence to establish the Dignity in Transit Foundation, a non-profit organization that provided legal support to victims of transportation discrimination and funded training programs for service industry workers. "Respect isn't something you earn based on your bank account," Dante said during the foundation's inaugural dinner. "Respect is something every human being deserves simply because they exist. Our goal is to make sure that principle is reflected in every aspect of the travel experience." The foundation had processed over 3,000 complaints in its first 6 months of operation, resulting in policy changes at dozens of companies and legal settlements for discrimination victims. Carmen Rodriguez stood at the podium during Unity Airlines' first annual passenger advocacy conference, addressing an audience of airline employees from around the world. "6 months ago, I was afraid to speak up when I saw injustice because I thought my job was more important than my principles," she said. "Today, I know that a job without principles isn't worth having, and a company without values isn't worth working for." The audience, composed of flight attendants, pilots, ground crew, and managers from 23 countries, gave her a standing ovation. Elena Vasquez had been promoted to Vice President of Cultural Development, overseeing diversity and inclusion programs for all Horizon Aviation Group properties. Her military background had proven invaluable in implementing large-scale organizational change. "In the military, we have a saying, 'Leave no one behind,'" she told a group of airline executives. "That principle applies in civilian life too. Every passenger who boards our aircraft deserves to feel safe, respected, and valued." The academic world had embraced the Flight 447 incident as a teaching tool. Harvard Business School had developed a case study examining how corporate culture influences employee behavior. The Yale Law School had created a clinic focusing on transportation discrimination cases. Dr. Michael Thompson, a professor of organizational behavior at Northwestern University, had written extensively about the incident. "What makes the Flight 447 case unique is not that discrimination occurred. Sadly, that happens frequently," he wrote. "What's unique is how quickly and comprehensively the consequences unfolded. It demonstrates that in the social media age, racist behavior can trigger immediate and permanent consequences." The international impact was equally significant. The European Union had adopted new regulations governing passenger rights, inspired by the Unity Standard. The International Air Transport Association had recommended similar policies to its member airlines worldwide. As Carmen Rodriguez prepared to leave her office that evening, she looked at a framed photo on her desk herself, in her new office next to her daughter, who had just started first grade. Below the photo was a handwritten note from Dante Rivers. "Thank you for proving that courage comes in all forms and from all places." She thought about the young woman who had been afraid to speak up 6 months ago, and the confident advocate she had become. The transformation hadn't just been in policies and procedures, it had been in people's willingness to stand up for what was right. As she turned off the lights in her office, Carmen smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to advocate for passengers who might otherwise have their dignity overlooked. But tonight, she was proud of how far they had all come. The work wasn't finished. It might never be finished. But real change was happening one flight at a time. 1 year after the incident that changed everything, Dante Rivers sat in seat 2A on Unity Airlines Flight 447, the exact same route where his quiet dignity had dismantled an empire and rebuilt an industry. The seat looked identical, but everything else had transformed. Carmen Rodriguez, now nationally recognized as a leader in passenger advocacy, performed the pre-flight safety demonstration with confidence that came from knowing she worked for a company that valued her voice. Elena Vasquez moved through the cabin with the bearing of someone whose military principles finally aligned with her civilian responsibilities. Captain Williams, permanently humbled by his failure, but determined to earn redemption, announced over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Unity Airlines Flight 447 to London." Today marks exactly 1 year since this flight route became a symbol of change in our industry. We're honored to serve passengers who expect and deserve equal treatment regardless of their background or appearance. The passenger manifest told a story of transformation. Dr. Jennifer Walsh was traveling to London to speak at an international conference on transportation equity. Jake Morrison was documenting the anniversary flight for his upcoming book about corporate accountability. Maria Santos, now a federal whistleblower advocate, was heading to a European Union hearing on financial discrimination. But the most remarkable passenger was seated in 2B. Bradford Kane looked like a man who had been broken down and carefully rebuilt from scratch. His expensive suit had been replaced by simple, clean clothes. His arrogant bearing had been replaced by genuine humility. He was traveling to London not for business mergers, but for a speaking engagement with university students about the cost of prejudice. The past year had been the hardest of his life. Federal prison had stripped away his privilege and forced him to confront the reality of his actions. Court-mandated community service had put him in contact with the minority business owners his family's bank had discriminated against. Therapy had helped him understand how his upbringing had shaped his racist assumptions. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Bradford approached Dante's seat with nervous steps. "Mr. Rivers," he said quietly, "I know I don't deserve your time, but I wanted to thank you." Dante looked up from his book. Ironically, it was a biography of Frederick Douglass, and studied the man who had once called him a thug. "Thank me for what, Bradford? For not destroying me completely when you had the power to do so. For creating consequences that led to change instead of just punishment. For showing me that there was a better way to be human." The conversation had attracted the attention of other passengers, but this time the watching eyes held curiosity rather than tension. "You destroyed yourself, Bradford. I just made sure there were consequences for your actions." Bradford nodded, accepting the truth without defensiveness. "I spent 6 months in prison thinking about that moment when you offered me the chance to apologize and I couldn't do it. My pride was more important to me than your dignity. I've learned to live with that shame, but I've also learned to use it as motivation to be better." Carmen Rodriguez paused her service to listen. She remembered the arrogant man who had dismissed her as irrelevant, and she saw someone fundamentally changed. "What are you doing in London?" Dante asked. "Speaking at Oxford about unconscious bias in business. Sharing my story as a cautionary tale, trying to prevent other people from making the mistakes I made." Bradford pulled out his phone and showed Dante a photo Bradford serving meals at a homeless shelter. Bradford reading to children at an after-school program, Bradford shaking hands with a black business owner whose loan application his family's bank had once rejected. Community service taught me something my privilege never did, that everyone deserves basic human respect regardless of their circumstances. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Mr. Rivers. I'm just grateful for the education. Dante studied Bradford's face, looking for signs of performance or manipulation. What he saw instead was genuine remorse and hard-earned wisdom. The man who offered me $1,000 to move to coach is gone, Dante said finally. I can see that. The question is, who did you choose to become instead? Someone who listens more than he talks. Someone who asks questions instead of making assumptions. Someone who understands that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in how you treat people who can't do anything for you. The transformation was remarkable. The entitled heir who had triggered a year of consequences had become a man capable of growth and accountability. Elena Vasquez approached their conversation, her military posture softer now, but still strong. Mr. Kane, I want you to know that your story has been part of our training program. New employees learn about the cost of discrimination through your experience. Your mistakes have helped prevent others from making similar choices. Bradford's eyes filled with tears, but he held Elena's gaze. If my failures can help other people do better, then maybe some good has come from all this pain. Jake Morrison, who had been discreetly recording the conversation for his documentary follow-up, lowered his camera. Some moments were too sacred for social media. As the flight continued, passengers began sharing their own stories of transformation. Dr. Walsh talked about how witnessing the original incident had inspired her to address bias in medical settings. Sofia Martinez discussed her work exposing discrimination in hospitality. Maria Santos shared how finding the courage to speak truth had given her a new career helping other whistleblowers. The cabin had become a space for healing conversations that would have been impossible a year ago. When the flight landed at Heathrow, passengers didn't rush to deplane. Instead, they lingered reluctant to break the connection they had shared during the journey. Bradford Kane approached Dante one final time as they prepared to leave the aircraft. Mr. Rivers, I know this might sound strange, but I want you to know that the worst day of my life led to the best year of my life. Losing everything forced me to find something I didn't know was missing. My humanity. Dante shook Bradford's hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a year ago. The measure of a person isn't whether they make mistakes, Bradford. It's whether they learn from them and use that knowledge to lift others up. As they walked through Heathrow Airport, the two men represented more than personal transformation. They embodied the possibility of redemption, the power of consequences to create change, and the hope that even the deepest prejudices could be overcome through honest self-examination. Carmen Rodriguez watched them from the gate, thinking about her daughter, who was growing up in a world where airline employees were trained to treat every passenger with dignity. Elena Vasquez smiled, knowing that her military values of honor and equality had finally found their place in civilian life. The legacy of Flight 447 wasn't just about one moment of racism being exposed. It was about an entire industry learning that true first-class treatment meant respecting every human being's inherent worth. A year later, discrimination complaints in the aviation industry had dropped by 67%. Customer satisfaction scores across all airlines had reached historic highs. Employee morale had improved dramatically as workers felt empowered to do the right thing without fear of retaliation. But perhaps most importantly, millions of people had witnessed proof that quiet dignity could triumph over loud prejudice, that one person's courage could inspire widespread change, and that accountability, when paired with the possibility of redemption, could transform enemies into allies. As Dante Rivers walked through the terminal, he reflected on a truth that had guided his entire journey. Real power isn't about having the ability to destroy your enemies. Real power is having the wisdom to help them become better people. The flight was over, but the journey toward justice would continue. One passenger, one conversation, one moment of dignity at a time. If you've ever been told you don't belong somewhere because of how you look, this story is for you. Have you witnessed discrimination or found the courage to stand up when it mattered? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone else to speak up. Hit that like button if you believe dignity defeats arrogance every time. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that prove quiet strength can change the world. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to remember that respect isn't about your bank account. It's about your character. Because when we stand together against injustice, we don't just change flights, we change lives. Thank you for watching, and remember, true first class isn't about your seat. It's about how you treat others.